Hey there, welcome back to PowerStroke Maintenance. In this video, we're going to be talking about longevity and reliability of the 6.7 PowerStroke with bearded Ford tech. Make sure you stick around to the end because we're going to be talking about two things that you can do to keep your PowerStroke happy and healthy and running well into the future. This is going to be a series. After having a few conversations with Lake, I thought what better way to learn more about PowerStrokes for both me and you, the viewer, than to talk with folks in the industry. And I've learned a lot from Bearded Ford Tech's videos, even before we got to know each other, because I watched his channel. I found out about him through PTT. And so it was actually Bearded Ford Tech's video that led me to start doing oil analysis and reach out to Lake and all that. So yeah, thank you so much for being here, Anthony. Appreciate it. So obviously today we're going to talk about the 6.7 PowerStroke longevity and reliability. And so Anthony works on a fleet of PowerStrokes, almost 50. And it sounds like, just based on, as we were talking before, you've pretty much seen it all. You've had CP4s fail, but you're keeping these engines in these vehicles, running constantly. And yeah, I can't imagine dealing with 50 PowerStrokes. It's hard enough with one. So I guess to get started, I was curious, what led you to become a Ford technician? Like, how did you end up working on Fords?
My family owned a diesel repair shop for about 45 years. And I always hung out there when I was a kid. And then going through school, in high school, I took Auto Tech 1 and Auto Tech 2. Was dating this girl for like 4 or 5 years, and I had a baseball scholarship, and I gave it away. I let it go to be with her, which was probably the biggest mistake of my life. And so I was like, I got to do something. I'll just get into mechanics since I've been around it. And so I worked on 18-wheelers and since about 2002. And wow. I got into it, and then I was like, well, I need to move along. I'm going to start working at a Ford dealership. So I started at Ford. I actually started out in the quick lane, changing oil and doing tire rotations and brakes. And I told my boss that I wanted to be certified. And he said, well, you got to do all your web courses and we'll send you to school. And here I am now. And a lot of training, a lot of web courses, worked at 3 different Ford dealerships. So it's a good learning experience.
Yeah, no, it sounds like you've put your time in. So how many years is that then that you've been working on Fords for, since you showed up at that first dealership?
At the first dealership, 2012.
Wow.
So 12 years.
Yeah. Yeah. So you have quite a bit of time invested. Yeah. Oh, that's cool. And what made you decide to start a YouTube channel?
That's a really good question. So going back to what you said about dealerships, there's a lot of empty promises at dealerships. They'll tell you one thing and then something else completely different happens. It's all about sell, sell, sell. And I'm not the type of person to sell something to somebody that they don't need. It's pointless to me. I don't want anybody to do that to me.
Right.
So I don't want to do it to anybody else. And dealerships don't like it when you do that. So, and then I was like, I want to start a YouTube channel. If I can show somebody how to work on this with something that they can do at home for free information, and they can save a buck to do it, then by all means, I'm going to teach you how to do it. You know what I mean? So the whole point of it was, we'll take you, for instance, you drive a PowerStroke, you want to know how to maintain it, you want to know how to work on it, and you can do it with a lot of basic hand tools that you have at home. If it's something that you can do at home, why take it to a dealer or a shop when you can save that money?
Right.
So, and also to tell people what to look for when they go into a dealer, what to listen for, what to look for, what they're telling you versus what's really going on, to try not to get ripped off. That was my whole goal. And do testing on different types of oils and stuff like that. But that was the whole reason I started it, is to help the viewer. If they can save money doing it, and they can do it with, some things take a lot of patience to do. They can do it, by all means, do it. That's what I want.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's a cool mission. And it really seems like especially on these vehicles. I mean, they're just so complicated these days. It seems like it almost makes it easier to be taken advantage of, because you don't know everything that's going on. If you're just, say you go out and buy one of these and you don't, understand the after treatment system, or you don't understand, the problems with the fuel system, it, like, whether there's a problem or not, it just, you're definitely vulnerable when you own one and you don't know everything that's going on.
And I don't know everything. Every day is a learning curve. Sometimes I got to reach out to PTT with A-Rod. Like,
Right.
hey, dude, did I miss something here? Because this is whipping my butt. And he's like, did you check this, this, and this? And I'm like, yeah. He goes, well, try this. And that's good that I can call Aaron and he can help me out with that, because it may be something that I've never seen before that he has.
Right.
And sometimes it's something that he hasn't seen that I have. And it goes both ways.
Right. So. Yeah, no, that's cool. It's cool to have that network, that you can rely on and, just reach out to if you need help. One of the other things I was curious about, so you mentioned in your, when you're kind of explaining why you started YouTube, obviously your main goal is to like help people understand their vehicles and not get ripped off by dealers or shops, that are charging exorbitant fees and doing work that doesn't need done. What prompted you to start doing oil testing? Because, I know for me, it was something that I had never thought of until I saw your video, and I knew it was out there, but I didn't really understand the power of it as a tool to take care of your vehicle. So what made you start getting into it, and like, how did you get connected with Lake? Like, how did that all unfold?
So the oil testing part of it, when you do an oil test, it will tell you what is going on inside of your engine, things that you cannot see on the outside. So right. If you have a coolant leak, for instance, and there's nothing on the ground, where is it going? It doesn't just evaporate.
Right.
So an oil test will tell you, hey, there's glycol or water inside your oil. That's going to tell you that you have an internal coolant leak somewhere. And that's just an example. It'll also tell you what wear metals are in there, what's wearing out. If you got high fuel dilution, that could tell you that you got a stuck injector, or one of your sensors could be going bad, or biased, which means it's dumping fuel.
Right.
Those key indicators will also tell you if the oil is still good. Now, rule of thumb is what, 3,000 or 5,000 miles? That's fine.
Generally, yeah.
And send it off to get testing. Just because the engine only has, say, 30, 40, 50,000 miles on it doesn't mean that it's good. No two engines are exactly alike, even though it's the same kind of engine. Everybody drives different. Now, I also did the testing because the way this fleet runs, if I was to do oil changes every 3,000 miles, I would be doing oil changes on these things every 2 weeks or sooner. So using a good product, sending it off for testing is going to tell me, A, if there's anything going on inside the engine that I can't see externally, and B, is my oil still good for use? Is it still doing its job? Can this truck still go out and perform its duty and not break down?
Right. Because you said earlier, sorry to interrupt, but you said earlier, I mean, you're essentially working on 50 PowerStrokes.
Yes.
So if you're doing 3,000 mile oil changes on 50 PowerStrokes, like that's absurd. That is, yeah.
There was no way, if I was doing that, there'd be no way I would be able to get anything done. I would be spending more money on oil changes. So A, it does go to cost effectiveness. If it's going to cost me X amount of dollars to go 3,000 miles and I have to do them, every 2 weeks, or is it going to cost me X amount of dollars and I can go 8,000, 10,000 miles and it can stay on the road longer and it's still doing its job. So I save money out of my budget, and the fleet still goes. You see what I'm saying?
Right.
So it's a cost effect thing, but it's also telling me what's going on inside the engine. If there's any problems that I need to address or need to keep my eye on to see if it gets worse.
Right.
Or if it's normal. So PowerStrokes, they do dilute fuel. That's why Lake said that he needs to change the number on that fuel dilution on your last video.
All right.
Because I think 2%, anything below 2%, that's for a gasoline engine.
Right. Right. And the PowerStrokes are like near 4%. Mm-hmm. It's kind of what mine's been at. So
yeah. So I don't know what he's going to change that number to. but it'd be interesting to see.
Yeah.
And then you
Interesting.
asked how I came across Lake. His video actually popped up in my channel one time, and this was before, I think he only had like 60 or 80 subscribers at the
Oh,
time.
wow. That's
And
crazy.
I sent him an email, and he emailed me right back. And come to find out, he only lives like 2 hours from me. So yeah.
That's crazy. That's cool, man. That's really, really cool. Well, I want to make sure we have, plenty of time to cover kind of the main topic and the main reason I wanted to talk to you specifically, because you're working on all these power strokes, and what I've seen, and they're, a lot of them are high hours, high mileage, right? So, you know, I'm really curious, from a standpoint of longevity and reliability, like what you're seeing with these engines, because, as I'm sure people love to whine about, the reliability of these modern diesels and kind of be like, well, emissions causes them to fail, and like CP4, and like it's not worth it. And so I guess I'm really curious to kind of get a picture of, how are these power strokes behaving for you? Like what are some of the failure points, and like, do you think the diesel still makes sense? So I know that's kind of like a general picture of what I want to get into, but I guess, to start, like, what are some of the things that have failed on these engines that you're taking care of?
CP4 pumps, that's because everybody knows a CP4 pump is garbage. They are not great. We replace those. We're actually converting the whole fleet on the ones that haven't failed. Let me back up. The ones that have failed, they have a DCR pump from S&S. The ones that haven't failed, they're being converted to the DCR pump from S&S. That way we don't have to worry about it anymore.
Right.
We are installing the AMSOIL bypass, dual bypass systems on them as well. Now, the difference between the fleet and, say, a normal person that just buys a truck because it looks cool. Now, you use your truck because it's your work truck. You drive a lot. These diesel engines like heat. You got to have heat. Otherwise, you're just going to get soot built up in the DPF. Your DPF is going to fail prematurely. You got to have heat. You can't just drive it around a mile up the road, go to the grocery store, and drive it a mile back home and park it in your driveway.
Right.
It's a diesel truck. It needs to work. As far as the emissions or whatever goes, like the EGR, the EGR is kind of, I don't like them, because you're taking what the engine is, I guess, in a polite term, vomiting up, and then you're regurgitating it back into the system.
Right. Right.
But it wants to be cold, but then you got to have heat to get rid of the byproduct. It's a catch-22.
Right.
Now, these, I've had 2 DPFs fail. And that was because I had the code 2002, which is usually an internal crack inside the SCR system.
Okay.
It wasn't because it was clogged up or anything. Now, they will fail over time. These things run constantly, so they're always hot. CP4s fail. CCV boxes, they get the ones with the filters in them, they get clogged all the time. And you pull the oil cap off of it and watch the cap blow up and hit the hood. We take those off and we put the baffled ones, the new style.
Right.
So the ones that are on the newer trucks will actually fit the older trucks. Fuel filters, we replace those every 15,000 miles instead of 30 like Ford recommends. And we also run a fuel additive. Other than that, it's just oil changes, brakes. We go through a lot of brakes. There's one pulling up right now. But the main things I see fail are CCV boxes and CP4 pumps. I've had one engine failure, and that was because cylinder number 3, rocker arm, it was like the hold down had broke. So it was a constant misfire on number 3.
Okay.
And so it needed a new engine for that. That's the only engine failure I've had. Other than that, the typical oil pan leak.
Right. Right. Upper oil pan usually,
Upper
right?
oil pan.
Yeah. Interesting. And when the CP4s failed, were you able to trace it? Like, was it random? Did the driver put like DEF in the, fuel tank, or was there water in the fuel? Or did you like find the root cause of like why, or did they just kind of randomly decide to just knock themselves off?
So I got one outside over here. It's a 2018. It's got
Okay.
about 210,000 miles on it, somewhere around in there. We'll just call it 200,000.
Yeah.
The high side fuel pressure is, if you're looking at it on the PID, when it's calling for, 5,000, 4,000 to start it, it'll give it that. But then as you accelerate on it, and then you look at the graph and it goes up and it's calling for 16, 17, 18,000 PSI, it's actually doing like a wave and it's not constant. So what it's
Interesting.
calling for and what it's actually producing is not happening. So I have a very, very weak pump, which tells me that it is failing.
Interesting. And that could just be from it being worn out. I mean,
Correct.
so the pump itself, like, it didn't fully grenade. It didn't have
Yes.
the rocker arm twist sideways and dig a hole in the
Right.
little bearing that's in there, but
Not yet.
it's going. Okay.
So
That's
I'm going
interesting. So it's almost like partial failure.
partial. It didn't grenade itself, but I am going to replace that. They were on back order, and I actually just got one in Friday. They emergency ordered one from SNS for me, so I got
Okay.
it Friday. That's something I'll do Monday. I've had 2 of them in one day put DEF in the system. One of them, they pulled up to the DEF pump out here. It was like 3 o'clock in the morning. Sat there for 3 minutes pumping DEF into it while it was running.
Ah,
Yeah.
ow.
I actually have that pump right over here. I can go grab it in a minute and show it to you, what it does to the inside of that CP4.
Yeah, that would be
Then,
awesome.
and then another one, that was at like 3 o'clock in the morning. And then at about 7:30 in the morning, they put DEF in it. Literally parked right out here where the other one was, right beside it. They put DEF in it, and it ran for about 45 seconds. So
Jeez.
that one,
Ow.
complete fuel system on both of them. We're talking about, I had dropped the tank, flushed the tank out, flushed the lines, new filters, take all the injectors out, put new injectors in, new fuel rails, new lines, new manifold. I mean, the whole thing. It's like a 38 hour job, somewhere around in there.
Yeah. Man, that's
I'll get
rough.
I'll get that pump. This is what DEF does when you put it inside of a CP4.
I have not upgraded to the SNS DCR yet, but I do have SNS's disaster prevention kit because I got the kit right before they released the DCR. So at some point, I think I will upgrade. But for those who are curious, you can still get the disaster prevention kit. It's $400 versus the DCR, which I think is closer to $2,000. But
they're on back order.
They're on back order. Well,
they are
as
on back
they
order.
should be. It's like the only solution for it.
SNS says they are on back order. So that's the VCV valve. See all the white crusties?
Yeah, the glitter.
And then,
yikes.
That's what DEF does.
That is gnarly.
It's completely annihilated it.
Yeah, blew the top off. That is...
Well, I took the top of it off. But,
oh, okay. But yeah, all
down. I don't know. You probably can't see it, but it's
just like the metal that got chewed up.
That's actually crystallized DEF, and there is some
yeah,
metal
it is a little
inside
hard
there.
To see.
Yeah, there is some metal in there.
Yeah,
but that's what it does to the injectors, the fuel line, the fuel rail. It just crystallizes in there. It turns into like goo before it dries.
Yeah.
So don't put DEF in the system.
No,
it's an expensive repair.
Yeah, not cheap. Interesting. Well, so you've done that, and then you obviously do oil testing, and you're running these out. How many engines have you had oil related issues with?
None.
Wow.
None whatsoever.
Yeah, and see, I think the cool thing here is like you're running. Do you run by hours when you want to change them, or do you do it by mileage with the fleet that you're working on? Because I know sometimes.
Go ahead.
I was just say sometimes when I know like vehicles idle more than their driven miles, people will go off of the hours, for intervals. But I'm curious, kind of what your setup is for that.
So usually 1 hour is equal to about 30 miles. These will hit mileage before they hit hours.
Interesting. Okay.
They do a lot of driving. Some of them, depending on if it's a busy day or a slow day, they will idle for a little bit. But we've compared both of them, and it's usually mileage before it is hours. So we go by mileage.
Okay.
AC compressors in the summertime. AC compressors is a big one, especially with the newer ones. Those AC compressors are on back order, and they also have that AC issue where it'll start blowing warm. But
Right.
other than that, so summertimes I go through a lot of brakes and rotors. I have not had any engine failures due to oiling issues. None of them were oiling issues. Just that one failure that was due to the rocker arm,
Okay.
CP4s. That's bad when I have more CP4 failures than I do engine failures. It's pretty bad.
Yeah,
I've had,
there's an issue there for sure.
I've had one transmission failure, and that was on a 6R140 torque shift. That's the one I tore down. That's part of it right there. And then right there. But that actually didn't have AMS oil fluid in it. It was the original transmission with 549,000 miles on it. And it just 1-2 upshift was really harsh. And then the 2-1 downshift was pretty harsh.
What did it end up being? Did it just need like a new valve body or something, or was the...
No, I actually tore down the valve body on a separate video. One of the plungers was stuck in the valve body, and it wasn't allowing the forward clutch pack and planetary gear set number 1 to change ratios. You probably can't see it, but on the edge of the teeth here, they're kind of folded inward instead of being cut like they're supposed to. And there's nicks inside of it. And it's the same thing on the planetary. So it wasn't shifting like it was supposed to. And then the one-way direct drive, it spins one way, but it doesn't spin the other. And that's what it's supposed to do.
Okay.
There's supposed to be a Woodruff key on both sides. Yeah. And there was only one. I think one of them is like non-existent somewhere, and it got chewed up inside the transmission.
Right.
But the initial failure was the valve body plunger sticking.
Okay.
But I do go through a lot of...
That's the only trans and that had 500,000 on it.
Mm-hmm. All the other ones, they got 300, anywhere from, I got 2 brand new ones. They got about 10,000 miles on them. And those are the 10 speeds. That one came out of a 2012. So I've had to do about 4 or 5 valve bodies on the 10 speed. Mm-hmm. And that's usually what it is. I haven't had the CDF drum failure on the 10 speed. That was usually in like the 250s. I did a lot of those in the F-150s at the dealership. Yeah. I haven't come across it in the 450s. So
interesting.
Usually a valve body issue.
Yeah. Interesting. Okay. That's pretty crazy. What other issues have you come across that maybe aren't as well known? Like you talked about like CCV, CP4. Those are like, I feel like the 2 most talked about. Are there any weird ones that you've come across?
Yeah, I actually had one, and Aaron had the same thing happen to him. And I had one that was fighting me. It kept throwing, I don't remember exactly offhand what the code was, but it was dealing with air restriction. So I was like, man, it's got a brand new filter in it. None of the charge air pipes are clogged up. Doesn't even have gunk inside of it. The upper intake's fine. The lower intake's fine. I mean, it's not caked up.
Right.
That you can see. And I'm going and going and going. The manifold absolute pressure sensor, it was kind of caked up a little bit. Put a new one in it. Ran fine for about 30 minutes and started doing the same thing. And I called Aaron. Like, I'm at my wit's end. I need to talk to Aaron. Aaron goes, pull the throttle body off of it. It was a throttle correlation code. That's what it was.
Okay.
He said, pull the throttle body off of it and look down like where the EGR port is. Have you seen inside the lower intake?
Yes.
Have you pulled the throttle body off? So you have that cone right there. Back behind that, there's 4 ports, and they're only about this big. 3 of those were clogged.
And those ports are for the EGR.
Mm-hmm. 3 of those were clogged out of the 4.
Wow.
But you can't just look inside there and see it.
Right. You have to take the valve body off and then look in order.
You got to take the throttle body off, because you can't look through the top of the intake and see it, because the way the intake's designed, it comes in and then squirts or pushes air through, and then it goes down into the turbo, goes through the turbo, through the charge air cooler, and then into the upper intake. Well, if those ports are blocked, it's not pushing air through, it has a disruption. And that's where my throttle correlation was coming from. So it wasn't matching the air that was coming in. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, right.
So the
right,
throttle,
right. So,
the throttle blade is, you're going down the road and the throttle blade's at say 25%, and it knows that, but the air coming in through the other side is not matching the air coming through the throttle body. So I have a throttle correlation code. There's a restriction somewhere. Could be an air filter, could be a messed up sensor. I was mad when I found out that's what it was.
So that plug that was happening in 3 out of those 4 channels was caused. Is that sticky mess that comes in from the CCV and the EGR, and it mixes there at that portion of the intake, and that was what plugged those.
It's just a bunch of soot and nasty, just
schmutz. Yeah.
Schmutz. Yeah.
Yeah. Nasty. Have you ever taken apart any of these intakes and had them cleaned? I know, I saw a video that Dave's Auto Center did a while ago where they, took apart. It was a truck similar to mine. It was like a 2017. They took apart, the EGR cooler and the intake and cleaned everything. Have you ever done that on any of these trucks, or was that your solution to the restriction? You take the intake apart and clean it, or?
Nah, I don't have time to sit there and clean it. I just put a new one on it.
Just put a new one.
I don't have time to sit there and clean it. But if it's somebody at home, there's nothing wrong with taking that off and then cleaning it, and make sure it's clean, thorough, and make sure it is dry and doesn't have any more chemicals in it when you put it back on the truck. I actually do have a plastic one sitting on the ground over there. It's not really clogged up. Actually, it's not. I think it has a crack in it. But I have seen 3 of those crack, the upper intake.
Okay.
That's the plastic one on the older ones.
Yeah. Yeah, mine had that. Pipe. I just recently had Aaron swap it to the pusher intake, and it's much better. But
and I may convert all these to pusher intakes.
That would be sick. Have a fleet of pusher intakes.
Yeah.
Probably run a lot.
I might.
Yeah.
Because those upper intakes are nothing but problems, man. I don't like them. This one's not bad.
Yeah, that's pretty clean as far as.
Yeah, it's clean. It's probably got about 200,000 or 300,000 miles on it, but it has a crack in it. When I smoke tested it, there's a crack up here.
Dang, right near the sensor. That's crazy.
So that one's not too bad.
No. So you said. Oh, you have no idea. So you said earlier that, and this is something I made a video about this on my channel, but I'm interested because you work on both 7.3 gas trucks. You have a couple, and the PowerStrokes. So in your mind, do you think it's still worth buying these trucks, or do you think that diesel's on its way out? People should go buy a gas? Or
no, diesel's not on its way out. Diesel makes the world go round. Everything's diesel. As far as the gassers go, the 7.3, it's not a bad engine. They do have lifter problems like the Chevy GM 5.3 liter.
Right.
Most of those that I saw when I was at the dealership, those were in box trucks.
Okay.
Wasn't really in the F-250s or anything like that. I have 2 of them over here that have the 7.3, and of course they only got about 6,000 or 7,000 miles on them right now. I did do the oil changes at 1,000 miles, even though they tell you that you don't have to do a break-in service. That is just a rule of thumb for me. I want to get all that stuff out of there and put fresh oil in. You know what I mean?
Right. Right.
So it really depends on what you plan on using the truck for. Now, if you're just going to drive it to the grocery store and be a pavement princess, no offense to anybody, then get a gasser. If you're going to work it, you're going to drive that thing, you're going to get it up to temperature, you're doing a lot of towing, you're doing a lot of hauling, you're driving it across country, get you a diesel. You can go further on diesels, I mean, like mileage wise, how far do you go on one tank? You got a bigger tank on yours though, don't you?
Yeah. I got the S&B tank, but I mean, it's 800 to 1,000 miles when I'm not towing, and then towing, I usually about 600 miles if I keep it under 65.
So these are all 38 galley tanks. They're all
Okay.
aft axle. They're all behind the axle. Each one of them ranges on how many miles they go. It just depends on what they're doing. I do know when they come in at the end of their shift, they always fill it up before they come back here. So the next crew that has it has a full tank. You know what I mean? So I'm not really sure how many times they fill up throughout the day. I've never asked. That's a good question to ask them. But like I said, it really depends on what you're going to use it for. Like me, I have a Ford Ranger. I don't need a F-250 6.7 PowerStroke. It's one of my favorite engines, but I don't tow anything. I go back and forth to work.
Right.
So it would be kind of a waste for me to have that. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like you, on the other hand, you do towing. You drive across the country most of the time, and you need the torque because those diesels, they got high horsepower, high torque, and they're built for towing and hauling.
Right.
I'm not towing anything in my Ranger. Groceries.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. No, that's fair. So it sounds like it's application based for you. Like
Yes.
what's your application?
Yes.
And I mean, I have heard some people argue that even a gas truck, like, you can still tow pretty heavy if you get a 350 with a 7.3, but it sounds like you're saying the longevity of a PowerStroke is still, if you're going to be doing a ton of miles, like
Yes.
what you're seeing is you're still able to get at least 500,000 miles out of, or more out of these engines when they're a diesel.
Yes. I had one last year and a half ago. It sat out back behind the shop for a little while. It got T-boned in an intersection, totaled the truck. It had like 612,000 miles on it.
Wow.
Yeah.
Original engine.
Original engine, original transmission. It'd still be going if it didn't get T-boned in an intersection.
Wow.
So it does happen. I do lose some to getting T-boned in intersections or, stuff like that. Sometimes I do got to send them over to a body shop. I mean, it's different people that drive them every day.
Right.
I am not a body guy. I am an engine, transmission, suspension kind of guy.
Right.
But yeah,
Interesting.
it really depends. I say application wise, make that decision based on what you think you're going to use it for.
Right.
That's all I can say. I can't tell you what to buy, but I can teach you how to fix it if it breaks.
Yeah, you're good at that. Sounds like. Yeah. Well, I really appreciate the perspective, and yeah, I think for someone like me, like since I bought my truck used in 2021. It already had 48 on it, but I've been averaging almost 50K a year. And this last year, in the last 12 months, since the last time I had gotten it inspected, I had driven almost 80,000 in like 12-month periods. So,
well, it's like Lake said, fuel dilution is one of the number one causes of killing the oil. And that's usually caused by short tripping it. You don't let it get up to operating temperature to evaporate that unburned fuel that got into the crankcase. That's why you need to drive it. That's why you need the heat. The catalyst system on these diesels like heat. You got to have heat to get rid of that stuff. The hotter it gets, the less regions that you'll see. So if they're running constantly and it's a busy day, it may be 800 to 1,000 miles. And then if they are sitting idling and it's not too busy of a day, the DPF does get fuller quicker. And sometimes I'll have to go in and then they'll get busy all of a sudden. And then they'll call me and say that it went into derate mode. So I'm like, okay, we'll limp it back to the shop. And then I'll have to go in with the computer and do it that way.
Ugh. Yeah. And taking it at a derate, based on what I've seen from some other videos on YouTube, it's not a very fun process to go through.
It's not. It's not. Or when you have a DEF system fault, that's not fun either.
Ew.
I mean, I had one about a week ago. DEF system fault. It was a DEF reductant pressure too low. Okay, cool. Get up underneath it, and it's literally just spraying death all over the catalyst.
Oh
And I'm like,
no.
okay, well, yeah, we got a cracked injector, a cracked line, whatever. Put it up on the lift, and come to find out where it comes from the pump as well was actually broken right there too. So I got a new pump, new line, new injector, but then I had to get it out of that fault mode, which
Right.
means I have a certain amount of time to crank it up, and then I have to drive, and then I got to go 30 miles an hour to 60 miles an hour, hard acceleration, and then let off of it, back down to 30 miles an hour, back up to 60. And you got to do that like 4 or 5 times. Sometimes it doesn't take right away. Got to come back, let it cool off, then start the process all over again. It can be a pain.
Yeah.
You can't just clear the code and be done with it. It needs to see that there's no fault.
Right. Jeez. So it makes you jump through a bunch of hoops in order to get rid of the code.
Mm-hmm. I got to the point where I'm just like, screw it. It hasn't cleared yet. I'm just going to keep driving this thing till it gets really, really hot, like operating temperature. Do a couple hard accelerations on it, and then drive through town. A couple hard accelerations, drive through town. And then it'll ding, 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 and then the light goes away.
Just needed some heat.
Yeah, it needs some heat, man.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Anthony, for your time, and I appreciate you you coming on. I know we're a little bit we're 10 minutes over the kind of 30-minute mark. So I guess in closing, is there anything that you'd like to leave us with? I know this video, we've talked a lot about kind of the issues and the longevity that you're seeing, and it sounds like these engines will go the distance if you're prepared to take care of them and, potentially replace a few things. Like, they'll get there.
Yes.
But yeah, what else would you like to leave us with? Is there anything, any advice or anything?
Maintain it. Don't idle it for so long. They like heat. Get an oil analysis done. You may be wasting money changing it 3,000 or 5,000 miles. The only way to tell. But it's also going to tell you if something's going on internally that you can't see. I highly recommend oil testing. Obviously, it got you onto oil testing. You found out a lot by doing that.
Yeah.
But yeah, just keep it maintained. They will go a long way. If you start to see a leak, get the leak fixed. Oil's supposed to be in the engine, not outside the engine. So if you feel like it's having a problem, or if you have a check engine light come on, get it checked out right away. Don't put these things off, because it may be something simple. That something simple, if you let it go, turns into something major. So, and I'm here. If they want to reach out to you as well, I'm here to answer questions. I always respond to comments. That is me that responds to them. It's not my social media person that does it. It is me.
Yeah.
So,
well, we appreciate it. And yeah, Bearded Ford Tech on YouTube. Make sure you subscribe. He has a lot of really good information. And I think I have you on my channel. If you're interested in where I get my information from, I have the channels that I consider primary sources for PowerStrokes at the bottom. So you can go down to my main channel homepage, and I have Bearded Ford Tech there. I have a PTT. I do have Diesel Tech Ron and PowerStroke Help. Obviously, rest in peace to both of those guys. But I found their videos at about the same time I found PTT. So there's just a lot of good stuff. And if you find the right people, there's a lot of people that have junk information on YouTube, but if you find the right people, these trucks will go the distance.
Yeah, they will go. The DPF system, when the manufacturers and the guys design this thing, I mean, do we like them? No, we don't. They do serve a purpose. Yes, they do work when the truck is used like it's supposed to. When you start having problems is because it's just a fault in the system, like it has a crack in it or something like that, or sensor's not reading right, or you're not using the truck like you're supposed to. It's not getting up to temperature. They like heat. Heat is the thing.
Yep. So I guess to wrap, most important thing for your truck, if you want to get the most miles out of it and longevity, heat. Heat is number one, and then get your oil tested. Heat and oil.
Heat and oil. Heat and oil.
Cool. Yeah. Well, thank you. I really appreciate it. And again, if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to Bearded Ford Tech here on YouTube. I will pin a link to his channel in the comments below. And I will also reference the link to the video that got me onto oil testing that he did in the description. So this is Harry at PowerStroke Maintenance. Appreciate you watching this video. If you have any questions for either of us, drop them below, and we'll see you next time here on the PowerStroke Maintenance Show. Thank you.
Bye, guys.